A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Norman Goodfellows, and welcome to somewhere I have been looking forward to coming for a very, very long time, and not for the reasons most people want to come here. This is Core Restaurant in London. Clare Smyth, who like me is from Northern Ireland, her accent ever so slightly more pronounced than mine, who is not just a Michelin-starred chef, but generally regarded as one of the finest culinary wizards on the planet. And it is because of her outstanding food that most people make the pilgrimage to Core to come and try out a menu that has dazzled guests from all over the world. The waiting list is years and years and years to get on. In fact, I arrived here today, they don't have a lunch service, and there was still a queue of about 85 people outside the front door just hoping to get in and have a meal. But as good as Clare's food undoubtedly is, it is not for me the star attraction. Instead, that honour goes to the cellar I find myself in, and the dashing young sommelier whose rock star status just continues to grow. And in just a moment, we'll find out the latest accolade that has been bestowed upon the broad shoulders of Gareth Ferreira, South Africa's very first Master Sommelier, who's basically become the Lionel Messi of London wine circles. It's really exciting to be here to talk about Core, to find out what makes it such a special place, but also to delve a little more into the work of a sommelier in London, a sommelier at a place like Core, where the standards are so high and the expectations even more so, but also to find out about the growing wine empire. And you remember we had Gareth on the show not that long ago with a couple of mates as they put together one initial wine for a bit of fun. Well, that little bit of fun is turning into a thriving business with some very exciting wine on the horizon. So all that to come on today's edition of Dan Really Likes Wine. Before we get into that, though, and say hello to our celebrity sommelier, let's get some of the latest wine news. Two nights ago, we were at the restaurant you would have heard us talking about on Monday's show, Nalin Strauss's High Timber, the temple to South African indulgence that sits on the banks of the Thames. This was the first London event for the Nickel Foundation, and the chance to bring my foundation together with Laureus, who we raised money for this week, and celebrate the best of South African wine. There are some familiar faces. You can see there Cameron van der Berg, the Olympic gold medal winning swimmer and world record holder, who now calls London home, with his wife Nefeli, the former Miss Greece. They now live in London very happily and love their wine. They were along last night. Sean Fitzpatrick, also amongst the guests, the All Black Great, who explained how he'd always dreamt of playing for the Springboks and thinks they'll win the Rugby World Cup final by at least 30 points. He, of course, said nothing of the sort, but he did give us a wonderful insight into both rugby and Laureus, and some great memories of South African wine, of which he is extremely fond. We raised a nice, healthy sum of money. We also got to drink some brilliant wine. The Stark Conde 2019 Cabernet Sauvignon was in a lovely space, still young, but showing a terrific vintage. The Field Blend, which is something we're just starting to see pop up a little more in South Africa. The let's throw some vines together and see what happens. It's a little more technical than that, but the resultant wine was terrific. In the middle there, the Big G from Gerard Holden, magnums of that Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, that is big and bold and inviting as Gerard and his famous hospitality at Holden Manse. And then wine at the top, we were very fortunate to get from Uvamira. Their dance, I think here in London, sells for about 60 quid a bottle. That's like 3 million rand. And that was drunk very happily as well. So great night. Big thank you to Nalin Strauss and her team at High Timber, to Cameron and to Sean and to all the other guests who came through for a terrific night. Look out for more events on the horizon in London as we take advantage of the exchange rate to help prop up South Africa and celebrate some great causes, which in this case was the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation. Now, this is coming up, La Motte wine tasting. This is on Monday, and this will be at Norman Goodfellows in Fourways, where I will be joining the La Motte team and talking you through some of the new releases from the estate in Franschhoek. It's been in the news a lot, mostly because Jan-Hendrik van der Westhuizen has set up camp, and he's going to be doing so again later on this year with a pop-up restaurant, one of his many endeavors. There is some terrific wine out at La Motte. The Millennium was one of the very first wines I ever had in South Africa when I was at university. The Pernif and the Haneli are both terrific examples of what La Motte could do, and you'll get to taste release some of their new wine on Monday. Do come and join us. All the details on the Norman Goodfellows website. Would love to see you there if you're in or around Johannesburg. And this is coming up on the 14th of June. The 14th of June with the great Kevin Arnold, who has started a brand new chapter of his wine career. He's just an extraordinary person who's made such incredible wine over the years, and he's just genuinely one of the nicest people in the wine industry. And I'm going to be joining Kevin with what I expect to be a full house at the Old Oak at Royal Johannesburg. We'll be talking through the three wines he has. He's got a Chenin, he's got a Sauvignon, and he has got a red blend, and those will all be available with a terrific four-course menu from Chef Ransley Peterson. Put that one in the diary if you'd like to come along. Details on screen at the moment. Get hold of the team at Royal Johannesburg. We would love to see you there. All right, so I will be back then, but before that, I've got some wine drinking to do in some rather esteemed company. Now, I'd been preparing this on the 6 tube trips it got to get here. I only needed 2, but I took a few wrong turns, about how I introduce, and I had it all planned. It's Master Sommelier Gareth Ferreira, except now you've just gone and ruined all of my preparation, because as of yesterday, your peers have given you a fairly impressive accolade, Mr. Ferreira.
Yeah, it was actually a bit of a surprise, but yeah, welcome one. But yeah, there's we have a lot of sommelier awards and recognition for sommeliers in the UK and in London. And last night was the top 100 sommeliers in the UK revealed.
Don't tell me you got into the top 100.
Yes, yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Two South Africans.
2 South Africans.
Absolutely.
So what? High 80s, low 70s. Where did you finish in the top 100?
Number one. Yes. So it was
Come on, clap louder out there, everybody. That is phenomenal. Number one.
Yeah, I think it's nicer because it is something that you get nominated for by your peers, by suppliers, by people in the industry, and then an esteemed panel of judges kind of does a bit of research and background on you. And
is your dad still running that panel?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. And what a note to start on. Welcome back to the show, and lovely to be doing it beside you with some wine in hand at what you call home and what you call your office.
This is my office. Yeah, I spend a lot of time down here. So it's if I'm not on the floor, I'm down here busy packing away wine and having a glass or two as well. So.
Well, let's find out what this is. I'm going to ask you why we're drinking it at the end of the show, but what are we drinking to get things underway?
Well, I thought a nice little Pinot Noir to kick things off. So we've got the 2019 Storm Ridge Vineyard, which I think certainly is one of my favorite Pinot Noirs in general. From South Africa, I have huge respect for Hannes and what he does, and just a great guy, down to earth, and makes some incredible wines. So, yeah.
And the fact that it sells out so quickly is a testament to that. We're going to find out why we're drinking this and why Hannes is somebody you've been chatting to rather a lot a little later on in the show. But it's a nice way to kick off the South African connection. Obviously, you being South African, you're going to have a little nudge in the direction of your home country when it comes to putting together wine. But ultimately, especially at a restaurant like this, which has got such a name, you're only going to be able to add South African wine if it is perceived to be of the quality of the food that you get here at Core, and if people are wanting to drink it. When I came and looked over my shoulder, and there's sort of vintage Lafite and vintage Mouton Rothschild and vintage Pedro, so there's some wine here that's more than our GDP in South Africa, which is a low base, granted. So you're setting South African wine up against that. Is that a difficult sell? Was it difficult to bring into your wine list?
I think at certainly establishments like Core, we have a very classic clientele, which they experienced diners. They tend to know a lot about food and wine. They tend to have their own cellars at home. So it's, you're sort of not educating people on wine. They kind of know what they want already. So, the classic regions like Bordeaux and Burgundy and great Champagne and Italian wines is kind of their comfort zone. The great thing about South African wine and South Africa is a lot of guests that I serve have visited South Africa and have fond memories of it, and usually ask where I'm from. And once I say I'm from South Africa, they kind of, it's easier to kind of slide them down the road of trying a South African wine. And it's amazing to see guests these days that are familiar with the producers that we have on the list. It's you mention names and they're actually familiar with the wines, and yeah, it's nice to introduce them to something where they've been drinking great Burgundy, and then they try a Pinot Noir from the Hill Monada, and they go, "Why haven't I been drinking more of this?" At a fraction of the price. But yeah.
You mentioned price. If you're coming to a Michelin-starred restaurant in London, money's probably not going to be your greatest issue, but there's still going to be a lot of people who are looking for some value. How much of a factor is that in people understanding more and more what South Africa delivers, both in quality but also in terms of its price?
Yeah, I say it to a lot of the winemakers, and I do believe it. I feel like the wines are underpriced, certainly for the London market, and a lot of people are going to kill me going, "Why are you saying that? Don't put the prices up." But they just fall in a price bracket which I feel there's no other country that can compete with it. On London wine list, which it's an expensive city to eat and drink good wine, and generally, and I'm not saying that it's something. Oh, carry on.
Yeah.
Is it still running live?
It is.
Okay. I generally think that, the price point of South African wines, you just can't compete with it. The value for money is incredible. And like I say, I feel like we undervalue the wines a lot. And, you could be charging a lot more for these wines and people would still be drinking them. But I'm not saying put the prices up.
Let's put some actual numbers to that for some context. I come in and I order a reasonable vintage of a Bordeaux first growth versus I order let's say a Villafante. What am I looking at comparatively?
Well, it's probably 10 times the price to drink a Lafite or Mouton versus Villafante Series M from a good vintage. So, is a Lafite 10 times better? I guess that's a personal opinion. I don't think so. So, it's just it's difficult to compare prices. But certainly, Lafite First Growth is going to cost you probably 10 times more on a wine list. Both great wines. But yeah, I think you got to sort of make up your own mind whether you want to spend £1,500 or £150, and what enjoyment you're going to get out of it.
And then start multiplying that by 70 to 1 to lose count. What about what people are drinking from South Africa? Is it kind of across the board, or does our, I think, projection from South Africa that people around the world are loving our Chenin Blanc, for example, or know our Cabernet Sauvignon Stellenbosch well? Is there that understanding of particular varietals?
Yeah, I think Chenin Blanc's the one that gets the most attention, and probably for good reason. There's just so many world-class Chenins out there, and I think it's probably the one variety that truly stands up to the best of the rest of the world. So yeah, it's kind of the variety that people know the most, or guests certainly come in and they feel comfortable that if they order a Chenin Blanc, it's going to be a really high quality. But I think there's, the kind of wine drinkers in London, they're open to suggestions, and certainly if you're in establishments that have good sommeliers and they trust what you're putting in front of them, what you're putting on the wine list, and open to trying new things. We're talking about Pinot Noir now, and a lot of the time you mention Pinot Noir from South Africa, and international guests kind of shrug their shoulders and go, "Pinot Noir from South Africa?" You pour them a glass and they're blown away by it. So
as they should be.
Yeah.
The wine that you have in this particular room, there, got 3,000-4,000 bottles surrounding us. It's a treasure trove. In terms of putting that together, what broadly shapes your approach to creating this selection of wine for somewhere like Core?
It starts with the style of the restaurant, and you got to look at the type of what people are asking for, what people want to drink. I mentioned we're very classic in what we do, so we have to have a broad selection of the classic regions. Burgundy, Bordeaux, certainly two regions where we certainly sell the most of. So you need to have big selections, a lot of vintage depth, different price points. But yeah, it definitely starts with the cuisine, the type of food that's served, and the overall establishment, what kind of guests are coming here. We cover everything. it's not a place where people come in and start ordering natural and skin contact wine. So I don't have a huge selection of that, but there is an option if someone comes in. So I feel like we have to cover all bases, but the classic areas are what we have a lot of depth in. And then budget. Budget's always the good one. But I think, wine is such a big part of our business here. It's a big part of the experience when you come to Core. Claire understands that, and she knows that, and she knows the value of wine, and she knows that nothing in here is going to decrease in value. It's only going to go up. So she's quite happy for me to use the checkbook on a few occasions.
Tell me a bit about that relationship with Claire. Her name has skyrocketed in recent years as such a celebrated chef. What is it for you that makes her quite so good at what she does?
I mean, she's obviously a brilliant chef, but I think in her just understanding of the industry, her knowledge on how restaurants work, and for her, she'll always say it, the most important thing for her is the guest. Nothing else matters. If anything that we do in the restaurant is centered around, does that make the guest experience better? And that's just all she thinks about. And if the answer is yes, then we do it. There's no red tape around it. There's no ifs or buts. She's extremely determined. Nothing, I say this in a good way, nothing is ever good enough, which just makes you improve all the time. She's very good at business. So, a restaurant is still a business, and it needs to make money to survive, and we need to make money in order to have all these nice things. She's just overall a great ambassador for the hospitality industry, and obviously as a chef, world class. So.
I suspect she's also one of these chefs who mistakenly believe that food is the most important part of what goes on. Obviously, it is wine. The conversations that you have about the food and wine, are those quite regular in terms of what you're bringing into the cellar as she's developing new menus and developing what you serve at Core?
I think we've built she's built a level of trust with her over 6 years working with her. So she gives me free rein on what we buy and what we're bringing in. There is discussions. Of course, we have 2 tasting menus, which we offer wine pairings with, and there'd be sort of ideas that we toss around and what wines are going to go best. We taste the wines, she tastes it, and she tastes it from a different angle than a sommelier. So often it's a learning experience for me to see what she's looking for in wine compared to what I am. In terms of the list, she really leaves it up to me. Unless things start going wrong, then I think she'll continue to do that. I have a team of sommeliers as well who help me a lot in maintaining the cellar and the list. One of which is also South African, which is kind of forming a South African empire. Yeah, but so wine is a big discussion, a daily topic. Like I said, it's something that's a big part of the experience at Core. So of course she's very involved in what I do, but lets me run it.
Tell me a bit about this other South African sommelier, because you are number 1 according to the Som 100. Extraordinarily, your 2IC is also in the top 10. Yeah,
so I mean, Stefan Cobalt and I worked with each other 10 years ago at the Saxon when David Higgs was in charge. So David Higgs will know him quite well. I seem to remember the first day I walked into the Saxon once I was taken over, and Stefan was polishing glasses in 500 and accidentally broke one. I won't mention the words that came out of David's mouth. But
a chef using foul language, never.
But yeah, I remember that, and that's 10 years ago. He was a 21-year-old sommelier that was breaking glasses behind the bar. And, I looked 10 years later, and he was running the wine program at Pollen Street Social for the last 5 years, and he's busy with his Master Sommelier diploma, and clearly one of the most recognized sommeliers in London now. So it's nice to see how far he's come. It's great to have him on my team because it means I can do less. But and we're great friends, so it all helps. It's good. And another ambassador for South African wine.
We can't have enough of those. Tell me about the sommelier in London. I think in South Africa, there's a growing appreciation of the value and restaurants of having a sommelier, but it's still not every restaurant that has one. And in many cases, you've got a sort of a senior waiter who knows a bit about wine. It is growing, and people like Spencer von Amier and his team are doing a terrific job. In London, there does seem to be a greater appreciation of just how important a sommelier is in a top restaurant.
There is. I think, like you mentioned, in South Africa, the South African Sommelier Association is doing an incredible job to put the spotlight on the profession and how important it is in restaurants. I think it's just a little bit behind the UK, and I'm sure it'll get there one day. The UK and London specifically, it's an incredible place for food and wine. UK makes a lot of wine now in the south of England, but I still feel like London's sort of one of the capitals of the wine world if you look at what goes on wine-wise. So of course there's going to be a lot of attraction for wine professionals, be that sommeliers, masters of wine, journalists, critics, and restaurants that rely on wine for a lot of revenue. I think the margins for restaurants are so tight. You're really making your money on wine, and that's great for us because it means we have a job.
And it's one you genuinely seem to love. Is the passion still as great as ever for what you do? Yeah.
Wine. I love wine. It's given me so much over the last 15 years. The profession of a sommelier is really, really rewarding in two ways: guest satisfaction, but also, the peers that you become really good friends with. You see their children grow up. You spend the weekends drinking wine with them. So I think there's a very, very strong connection with the sommelier community worldwide. I can pick up a phone and probably speak to 10 sommeliers in the US, but I haven't seen them in 10 years. But wine brings everyone together, and it's the same with South Africa. I go home once a year, but I go home and my schedule is packed out with lunches with Derek Kilpin and lunches with
you turn into Greg Sherwood for a week.
So lunch a lot, yeah. But no, the passion is still there. I love service, and I think as a sommelier, that is your main job, is service. You need all the knowledge behind it and the technical ability, but it's really just looking after the guests at the table. And if they leave and they go, I had a great bottle of wine, it was served in the right glassware at the correct temperature with great food, and I got looked after, whatever I paid for the bill was worth it. And that's really the main part of what we do.
Part of what makes me very fortunate is I get to do a lot of very cool stuff in the wine industry, but I've got a wonderful sense of balance, and that there's also the sporting and television side to what I do, and the event side, lots of travel. So I do lots of different things. What does Gareth Ferreira do to get that break from wine, to just ensure that it doesn't become all-encompassing and drown you in a single industry?
I was growing up, sport was my life. Cricket, rugby, tennis, golf, it was everything to me, and I love sport. I still watch and follow just about any sport that's going around, but I think in my old age now, I'm not so good at turning the arm over on the cricket field anymore, but golf is probably my one escape now, and to get out and hit a few balls even on the range and have a few rounds and a few beers on the golf course with some friends. That's really my proper escape. But otherwise, a nice braai is still good, even if it's in London.
I'm glad you're using that word, because before we started filming, and he's going to blush here, but he used the word barbecue, and I was very upset by that, because got back to braai. So thank you for that. Well done. You mentioned sport and your love of it. I'm sure there are plenty of athletes who've come through the doors here, amongst other well-known faces. Are there occasions where you've got up to them and go, oh my goodness, I know who that is? Does that happen quite often here?
It does, yeah. I mean, we've got some great regular guests that are celebrities, and I won't name them. I probably shouldn't, because that's why they come here. They come here to get away from it all, and you know, a lot of them are very down to earth and they love their wine. And yeah, again, wine is the connection between. It brings two worlds together. Someone who spends their life in a cellar and someone who has all the fame, but you know, we can get together and talk about wine for a couple of hours. And yeah, I mean, Cameron, you were with Cameron the other night. He's been a few times, and yeah, love having him over. And it's always great to run into. I mentioned I walked past Francois Pinot the other day, and I almost pulled a muscle in my neck. I wasn't quite sure if it was him or not, but you know, since then I've walked past him a few times.
I had lunch with him a couple of weeks ago. So you won't believe this, but I think I might have walked past Gareth Ferreira in the street, the celebrity sommelier.
So yeah, I'm gonna keep an eye out. I don't know if he's a local around here, but I definitely say hello to him next time.
We'll have to put the two of you in touch. He would love to be here because he's a great lover of food and wine and a great bon vivant, and he would love, as I do, this particular cellar. Before we discover why we are drinking this storm, for the rest of this cellar, I'd like you to give me 3 particular bottles. I'd like to know what the single most expensive bottle of wine you have in this place is, the one bottle you would take with you if the place, we won't say caught fire, but if you had to run off with one particular bottle, and then what you think is the most interesting bottle of wine in this cellar.
That's a difficult question. I mean, the single most expensive bottle, I can actually probably turn around and grab it for you, is the 59 Mouton. Which yeah, actually that just came in a couple of days ago. I mean, 59, as far as Bordeaux vintages go, it's one of my favorite. I feel like I've never opened a bad bottle of 59, and I think
that's fine. We can open.
Okay, yeah, for Mouton, I mean, for 59s, I think, you know, 59 Mouton, 59 Opéron, it's probably 2 of the best bottles of wine I've ever tasted.
What would one pay for that bottle?
That would be about £7,500.
That's about 170,000 rand, I think. Could be 180 by the time the show's finished.
But yeah, that's the single most expensive bottle, and probably one that I'd also walk out the cellar.
All right. And will that sell pretty quickly?
It might hang on the shelf for a few months, but there's definitely a few guests that I know that visit us regularly. That's
a quiet whisper in the ear.
That's kind of, you know, I almost buy it for them. I know when they come in, but yeah, some I mean, amazing vintages behind us here. 59, like I mentioned, is one of my favorites. So there's some 59 Margaux, 59 Mouton, 59 Opéron. Yeah, not bad wines. Most interesting bottle. I might go to the bottle that's in front of us there, the one with the date on. And it's not interesting because of what it is, but it's interesting because of the date that's on the bottle.
25/01/2021.
Shall I grab it? Quickly?
Yes.
Okay, let's quickly grab it. I'll tell you the story behind it.
All right.
There is a story, and that's why it's still in the cellar.
So there is a rather large bottle of wine coming our way. It might even need 2 people to carry it. It is that size.
It's empty, though.
Sadly, it's empty.
We did drink it.
All right. What have we got there?
So this is actually, it's a Jeroboam of 2004 Dom Perignon. And I'll tell you that the story behind that is a good friend of the restaurant, a good friend of Claire's. When we got our 2nd Michelin star in 2018, gifted her this bottle as congratulations. And she handed it to me and said, put it in the cellar. We'll drink it when we get 3 stars. So it was in the cellar for 2 years. And the 25th of January 2021, which was the Michelin reveal. We were still in lockdown, and we're doing Cord Home, a little takeaway service that we're doing, fine dining takeaway. And we're all upstairs, and there were some rumors and a bit of chat going on, and Claire needed to jump on a live call with Michelin, and she walked past me and she said, make sure the Dom Perignon's cold. So I put it on ice. We got our 3rd star, and we opened it and we drank it.
That's
So I
a
sent it to
wonderful
get engraved.
story.
So that's a special bottle for me to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's a long goal. I've always wanted to work in a 3 Michelin star restaurant, and to be part of actually the team that achieved it is a special memory.
So just to clarify, they didn't have 3 Michelin stars. You came to work for Core. Now they've got 3 Michelin stars.
No. I mean, I opened Core in 2017, or was part of the opening team, which obviously we had to start from nothing. Claire had 3 Michelin stars with her at restaurant Gordon Ramsay, but opening Core, we had to start all over again. Lot of work. These guys that are busy doing prep around the corner, you can probably hear some kitchen work going on, but they put a lot of blood, sweat and tears into it. It's nice to see it come.
Just before we talk about this Hannes Storm and some of the adventures you've got coming up, you mentioned the food. It is a restaurant which people come to because of those 3 Michelin stars in those small parts. If people are coming for dinner, they've never been to Core, what are they expecting? What is it about the food here that's wowed the Michelin judges and has you so packed so often?
Well, I think Claire has an identity. She, and everything that she puts on a plate, there's a reason for it being there. Produce is huge, and then to take that amazing produce that we have in England, in Britain. I mean, we are a restaurant that champions British produce, and there is incredible produce all over England, but it's to take that and to make something really special on the plate, and she just does it every time. So there's a team around her that executes it, but there's nothing that gets put on the plate that is not there for a reason or is not thought about. Just extremely good technical cooking, I guess. I'm not a chef, so I don't know how they do it, but it blows me away every time.
All right. Well, you compliment and bring the best out of that food with your selection of wine. We are drinking some wine from Hannes Storm. We've already paid tribute to what he does. I was at this particular vineyard, the Ridge, about a month or two ago. It is quite glorious to spend time at it, and in the Hemelanada, just getting better and better. So many of the estates, but Hannes is more than just somebody supplying wine for your restaurant. You're actually going to be working with him.
Yeah, very, very exciting. We were on the program a couple of weeks ago with Clayton and Ronan, and the 3 of us were visiting Hannes last September. In fact, we were visiting Hannes, but we were visiting all the winemakers in the Hemelanada, and we spent an afternoon with Gordon and Bevan, with Craig and Anne, with Hannes. And it was, I won't tell you what the afternoon ended up like, because there was about 30 empty bottles on the wall.
And that was just Bevan.
Yeah. But we had an incredible afternoon, and Hannes took us through all the vineyards. And at this stage, Collectible Vintage, the project that we got going on, had started, but we were only doing a Chenin Blanc. And I think the ideas started flowing when we were standing in the Ridge vineyard and the Ferreira vineyard and drinking Hannes's great wines and thinking, when is the best time to ask Hannes if he can be a part of this, and if we can work with him, and if he's kind enough to give us access to some of his juice. So I think it was after the 30th bottle that we thought now's the time. So we we approached Hannes, and he agreed that he will be glad to work with us and be glad to help us facilitate a Pinot Noir for Collectible Vintage. And I'm happy to say that a few of the other great Hemelanada producers that I've spoken to have kindly agreed to be part of it as well. And like I say, that project for us it's not about us, it's about them. So hopefully through what we bottle under Collectible Vintage, I can talk more about the great estates in the Hilmonada. So yeah, can't wait.
That's fantastic, and it's not only Hannes and by extension his neighbours, but I'm hearing rumours on the wine grapevine, a possible Sauvignon Blanc with Duncan Savage and a possible Chardonnay, maybe.
Exactly, yes. So some Sauvignon Blanc with Duncan. Duncan was actually sitting in the cellar just 2 weeks ago. He was on his way back to South Africa, I think, after a pretty long week in London. He looked like he'd been through a few bottles of wine. But yes, so Duncan has kindly agreed to help us with a Sauvignon Blanc, and Peter Allen has kindly agreed to help us with a Chardonnay. So we got some great names that we're working with. Some of the winemakers that I've respected and loved their wines for a long time, and it's just amazing to be able to work with them. It feels like I've known them for so long through the profession of a sommelier, but I get to know them on a different level now, and it's just exciting to work with them.
As a master sommelier, you'd imagine there's nothing you don't know about the wine industry, but I'm sure that process has broadened an aspect of your wine education considerably.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got nothing but admiration for what they do, because it's definitely not an easy thing. I've visited loads of cellars before and seen the winemaking process, but I think to understand everything that goes behind it, it's almost a scary project, but so rewarding. I mean, I'm sure, I can't think, I taste this Pinot Noir from Hannes, and I just think, how proud must he be of that wine in that bottle, and he's done that. It's crazy.
It's one of many wine success stories that we have coming out of South Africa and finding their way into places like London. It's always great to celebrate what's going well, and you're a wonderful example of celebrating the best of South African wine. But we're also an industry that still faces its challenges, and there's still a lot of work to be done in some areas. Where do you think South African wine, in the nicest possible way, can maybe do a little better, can maybe work a little harder to ensure that the presence in London becomes more pronounced?
Well, I think South African wine industry is a little too modest. I think they need to be a little more pushy, because the wines are as good as the best from anywhere else in the world. And I think it's the South Africans tend to be quite relaxed and easygoing and modest and humble people, which is exactly what makes them so brilliant, in that they are so humble. But I feel like maybe a little bit more pushy, and there's not much. I can't stand here and say that this is wrong and they should do this and they should do that, because they do an exceptional job. I think they just need to realize that more. But the wines speak for themselves. I don't think they need to do much more.
That's our great problem. Then we're doing something well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then finally, just from a London perspective, you've already spoken about Chenin Blanc and the popularity, particularly here at the restaurant. Are there other either regions or varietals that you feel are starting to catch London's eye from South Africa?
Well, I was judging Decanter World Wine Awards a couple of weeks ago, and a day of doing South African flights, and it's all blind tasting, so I don't know what we taste in. We taste in price brackets and from regions, and the flights of Sauvignon Blanc were exceptional, and I'm generally not. Sauvignon Blanc is not the first grape variety that comes to my mind when I sit in a restaurant and I want to order a bottle of wine. But the consistency and the quality of Sauvignon Blanc in every price bracket was exceptional. So, Sauvignon Blanc has been a great variety that loads of people are drinking in South Africa for a long, long time. But I don't think people realize how good the quality of Sauvignon Blanc is in South Africa. So yeah, that was one that really sort of surprised me, because I don't drink a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, and doing these tastings, you sort of get forced to taste wines that you wouldn't usually drink. And Sauvignon Blanc flights were incredible. So
well, cheers to that. We know that the future includes a vast amount of wine from your own growing label, and you're having not just some success with it, but clearly a great deal of fun.
Yeah.
But I do worry about you because you're now the #1 ranked sommelier in London, so the only way is down. You become a master sommelier. There's only more you can do after that. What is there left for you to do in this industry, Gareth Ferreira?
I mean, there's always things to do. There's always things to do. I mean, I'm still coming to work every day. I'm still working on improving the wine program at Core. I'm working on helping other sommeliers achieve their goals. I'm working on making sure that guests leave Core and have a memorable experience. So yeah, there's always something more to do. I mentioned, I think on the last show, that after passing the exam, it's nice to give back and to teach and educate, which I love doing. To be on the other side of things, it's even more nerve-wracking than doing the examinations, but I love that, and I think it's really rewarding. So yeah, there's still things. There's a lot of people that have helped me to do what I've done, and it'll be nice to kind of help the next generation, if you will.
I love that about you. It's very clearly a huge part of who you are and what you do, and that is fantastic to hear. As we wrap up what's been a delightful morning in your cellar, which I'm going to try and stay in once you've gone.
I'll give you an opener. Then you can
bring on that 59. If I could ask you for 2 final wines before we say goodbye to you, not necessarily in this cellar, in fact, probably not in the cellar. 2 wines, one that you will always remember as being a wine that really stood out, be it an early one that pushed you towards wine, or just that one bottle you thought, God, this is as good as wine gets. And then that one bottle that even you, the #1 ranked sommelier on earth, or thereabouts, has not had, but would love to.
Wow. I mean, the bottle that I would love to have that I haven't had is Romani Conti 2002, specifically 02. I love 02 red Burgundy, and I love Romani Conti. I don't get to drink it often, but that's one where I've sort of had it on a list before and gone, I need to sell this bottle because I need to taste it, and it's just never happened. So if anyone's listening and wants to send me an 02 Romani Conti, I'll take it gladly. And going back to, I know maybe it's cliche, the Romani Conti thing, but probably very early on in my wine career. I mean, I was working as a sommelier already for a couple of years, but I was still very green and didn't know a lot. And I went on a trip to Burgundy with the Great Domains team, and we stood in the cellar of Romani Conti and tasted wine with Aubert de Villaine, and it was a moment where I was going, I'm dreaming. So, we tasted through a few bottles, and he basically stood in the cellar, and all the bottles are unlabeled. They're just sort of chalkboards written with which vineyards and which vintages. And he blind tasted us and said, well, I'm going to open bottles, and I'll let you guess which vineyard and which vintage it is. And he started going back all the way to wines that he was opening from the 50s and 60s. And so, there's not a specific bottle, but more that moment where I was going, if this is what the wine industry is about, I want to be in it for the rest of my life. And that was, thanks to Derek and the Great Domains team.
And a wonderful team. They are just back, of course, from the Loire and their latest wine adventure. Well, I tell you what, in the spirit of the bottle that you showed us of Dom Perignon, I will arrange a bottle of 2002 Romani Conti for you on me when you get your 4th Michelin star.
Thank you. I'm going to get hold of Michelin and see if they can introduce a 4th star.
A brand new category. Heaven help me if they do. Gareth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not just for today, but you are a wonderful ambassador for South African wine, and also just a great success story. And to see what you've done, what you've put into getting what you've done, is really inspiring and uplifting. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, anytime you're in London, come and hang out in the cellar. And yeah, next time come for a meal. And,
most
I'll pour you some
certainly
O2 Romney Conti.
Done. That's a deal. Thank you very, very much indeed.
Cheers. Thank
So
you.
there we go. An audience with, as of this week, the #1 ranked sommelier in London. He's also South Africa's first Master Sommelier and the architect of so many wonderful evenings here at Core, when people think they're coming for the food, but end up realizing they've really come for the wine. That does it. I am off to go and spend millions of rand getting a tube back to my sister's house the other side of London. And I will be back in South Africa this weekend and back in Johannesburg next Monday. Our show comes to you live from Norman Goodfellows at Four Ways, where we'll be having that La Motte tasting afterwards. But join me on the show as we look at the history of the La Motte farm, try some brand new wines, and celebrate a corner of Franschhoek that was one of the very first I got to meet when I moved to South Africa. That does it for today from the cellar at Core, from which I will be forcibly removed by security a little later on today. Thanks very much for joining us with my special guest, Gareth Ferreira. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Goodbye.